Well, hello from Cornwall Channel TV studios on Bodmin Moor. I'm Kim Conchie from Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, and I've done a few conversations with people, but I've got a very special conversation to have today with Malcolm Bell, who is the Chief Executive of Visit Cornwall, as most of you will know, and has, I think, single-handedly moved Cornwall from its fairly sort of standard holiday bucket and spade offering of the 20th century into the most desirable place in the UK to come and stay. And I know, Malcolm, you're very proud. It's been, what, #1 UK holiday destination for 10 of the past 11 years or something, is it?
It was, yes. So we slipped 1 year to second.
Oh dear, who was it who nicked us then?
Northumberland.
Northumberland.
They got their vote out better than we did.
Did they? Right, yes, other end of the county. At least find out, at least it wasn't Devon or Dorset. No, that's...
No, they never came within 2 or 3 of us. So that's
No, good. So Malcolm, yeah, I mean, hectic at this time of year, every year, I imagine, as you sort of build up towards a summer. But this year with G7, which you've been on the inside of for, God, how many months now?
About 10 months. So
you had to sign NDAs and all sorts of things as you were approached, and then the full horror hit you of what this might mean, all full excitement.
And I think the excitement was at the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, it was back last summer, and funny enough, Abby in my place suddenly came into my room and said, I've got this woman on from the Foreign Office asking for details of hotels everywhere, and I don't quite know what it's about. And then she keeps saying, haven't you got any more hotels? And we kept saying no. And I said, oh, they must be having a conference, and dismissed it. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, I had a phone call from London to say, would I sign this form? Because I couldn't even be told who was coming to the meeting till I signed the form. Yeah. And then they came in, and I got taken into a room and told, and I think it was just me and Kate Canally at that point.
Right.
And then we did a lot of work on trying to establish all the bed stock available. And we were getting quite excited that this would be really good business to book up in October and November. And then, of course, lockdown happened. Decisions couldn't be announced. We couldn't secure the rooms. We kept saying, can we please do it before Christmas, before they book up? And then, of course, it had to wait until January. Right. And in fact, the final, only was about 3 weeks ago. So, and all during that time, the rooms were evaporating in terms of going off to normal guests. So we've had a nightmare of sorting accommodation.
Yeah,
but
right.
That's just life.
Yeah, that is life. But and I suppose the other thing, I wasn't aware until you were telling me a few weeks ago, just the size of some of the delegations that some of these leaders bring with them when they come to this sort of event is hundreds in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, they've shrunk, but they've, I think partly because of the technology and partly because of logistics and partly because of quarantine. Yeah, the Americans would normally bring about 1,200.
What do they all do?
There's about 200 to 250 aircrew, 2 big planes, lots of helicopters. Right. Lots of security people. Yeah. And they do set up a White House hub in Cornwall. There will be a White House hub. Right. At a location not to be disclosed.
Of course.
Just in case something happens, as well as Air Force One.
Right.
So they're the big ones.
Okay.
I have to say it's quite interesting because the Germans kept asking us the procedure, and we kept saying there isn't one, tell us what you need. The Canadians were lovely, easy to sort, and other people have sort of been quite interesting to deal with. So, and often the challenge is, and I'm not ashamed of this, is lots of delegations were surprised how expensive Cornwall was and had to keep getting authority back at Canberra or
Ottawa,
Berlin or wherever to actually say it's going to cost you £300 a room for the hotels you want.
Okay, so after a pretty tricky time in Cornwall for the hospitality industry, they're looking for it's a bit of a bounce back, is it? It's a good moment for them.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've done, as you say, you pointed out 10 out of the 11 years top UK destination, but we don't punch into international markets because people don't know. And the great thing about this is we've been doing some work for 2 or 3 years, talking to some American tour operators, and now we're Cornwall is up there now with the Cotswolds and Scotland. So and in long haul market it tends to be London. Yeah. Then the Cotswolds and the heart of England, then Scotland, and now we're starting to punch in there.
Okay.
But actually for this year, obviously there's a lot of bounce bookings, a lot of interest, a lot of spread booking going on with people booking overseas and UK. But it's actually going to a strong year. I know that will sort of depress some people in Cornwall, but we've lost over about 1.2 billion of business turnover.
So some of that to be made back is a really good thing. Yeah. I'm really interested in a couple of things you said there, because that I mean, obviously Cornwall is going to look great in the global spotlight for that G7. So that will help what you've been doing for the last 2 or 3 years over in the States in bringing ourselves to the attention of North American audience, for example, won't it?
Yeah, and I think the most interesting thing is because we've been having weekly meetings with Visit Britain offices around the world, and they're really excited. India was, I mean, obviously India's going through a bit of a crisis at the moment. South Korea, Australia. I mean, I know they're sort of new to the party.
Yeah, but the invited guests now. Yeah,
and we've been sending out a lot of B-roll of beautiful pictures of Cornwall, taken on a sunny day. Which is important. I mean, I think the one thing we tend to show, it's in our welcome film, is the history of Cornwall. You know, that it is about the rocks, and you know, and one of our welcome films actually explains with the heart of the Industrial Revolution. It's a great tourist destination, but we've got lithium, we've got geothermal, and we've got space. So we're trying to get a balanced view, even in the tourism message.
Okay, well that's interesting because
just not a tourist destination.
Yeah, because obviously my bit now is a lot later from a work point of view to the G7 thing. But what I'm trying to do is make sure that the values of G7, even though I understand there's lots of people who have very mixed feelings about inviting industrial leaders here to Cornwall at this time, but the opportunity for us as a business community to showcase to these foreign delegates and media is that, yes, we've got this amazing place and, you know, floating offshore wind, hopefully, and geothermal, you've said, and lithium, and, you know, onshore wind and solar and so on and so forth. So we are a 21st century economy in a very green and clean way, I think. And I think it's a really good opportunity to get the values of Cornwall, which are going to be really, you know, in this G7 mix of messages, I think, across in a really interesting and fresh way, yeah.
And I think one of the legacies I'd hope to do, and it's a bit of a short-term way of doing it, is that people perceive Cornwall as a bit of a California, not a Florida, and not a Tenerife, if you get me.
Yeah.
So, you know, California's got a massive tourism industry, very successful, very premium price. But it's known for everything else as well.
Yeah.
So I think just that roundedness of, you know, the California of Britain as a shorthand and a lift is what we've used.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, there's a lot more to it than just the tourism side.
Yeah, there absolutely is, yes. I mean, I've heard various vain attempts of Falifornia in Falmouth, where I live, and Kernofornia, but yes, we need our own identity, and perhaps this will help to create what that looks like going forward. Yeah.
And I think one of the exciting things going forward is almost, and it's been all these things, and when you're grey-haired like me, you've seen every tagline in the world, but you know, the future way to work. But I think actually Cornwall can have, in a way, the future way to live and work, because I think there's a lot of creativity and talent that needs the environment that we've got to actually perform really well.
I absolutely think so, and I think, you know, the things that we're concentrating on, one of them is well-being and well-being in the workplace, and that, I think, meets these other values of, you know, the shared values of we're on this planet together and we need to look after it. And, you know, there's an increasing feeling amongst young people that, you know, they want to work for a business with a purpose. They want people to be attentive to the people and the place, which I think we naturally are in Cornwall because we're so proud of where we're living, aren't we? And
I think, you know, and I can see this through my own two daughters' eyes, is that lots of the next generation are actually looking at us and go, maybe that's not the best way. I don't want to work like Dad, and I don't want to do, you know, and there's got to be a bit more to it than that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I think for those of us, you know, who grew up in school and education and a big recession, you know, we have been very work orientated. Next generation are more balanced. I think they've got a better view of the world than we had. And Cornwall's best place to do that.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think I was talking to somebody the other day who said, you know, we look back at the past and say, God, they did what? They did landfill, or they did colonialism, or other things that we disapprove of now. And probably 2 generations' time, they're going to look back and say, they were burning that fossil fuel knowing that it was you know, creating all these problems for the planet. They knew that, and yet they carried on doing it. So, you know, what on earth were they thinking about? And I can see that we might be the tail end of an oil age, or whatever it might be. That you know, we.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is I got involved in sustainability back in the 90s, certainly in the noughties, and I remember having a dinner with Jonathan Porritt, Friends of the Earth. Remember Jonathan Porritt? I remember presenting a tourism strategy when he was on the Regional Development Agency board. And you can imagine something like Jonathan Porritt, when you slide 3 into 20 slides and he's doing this and shaking his head, it does put you off. But I got on with him really well, and he helped us a lot. And I remember when he retired, he did this wonderful little dinner, and there was about 40 people in the room. So I'm not saying I was special, but we had this discussion about climate change in the world, and I remember he came up with 3 scenarios, because I always remember it. He said, you know, are we brighter than lemmings, really? Will we just carry on and destroy what we've got? He said, or will we, as human beings, get close to the cliff, suddenly wake up, smell the coffee, and avoid it, or will nature wipe some of us out?
Ooh, but
yeah,
you know, prescient, yes.
And you know, 1 year on, you tend to think, I think we're in the middle. I think sometimes people need to be, you know, and one of his things is, in which he said, I've been shouting at people for 20 years not to walk near the cliff. Maybe I should have waited till they were closer.
And
I do think that now we are actually getting it now, and we do think, and I think, you know, and I think people have stopped the excuse of, well, what about China? What about somewhere else? It's, well, let them sort themselves out. We've got to sort out.
Every individual's got to do something themselves.
And I think it's almost like a brand value now, and with our environment. You know, one of the things we've actually just done is a community attitude study on tourism, done in April this year, compared to 8 years ago when we last did it. Overall, people are quite supportive of tourism. In an ideal world, they wouldn't want them to come and just send the money, but that's not possible. But the thing that's sort of, you know, come through very strongly is look after Cornwall, improve the environment, improve the quality of life, which you can do. But also a lot more interest in nature, a lot more interest actually generally in the sort of backdrop of Cornwall.
Well, I think there are so many things, Malcolm, playing to Cornwall's strengths and values. Like, for example, Mental Health Awareness Week was last week, and the theme was nature this year. Well, we've got it all around us here, haven't we? I mean, looking out the window here at the Cornwall Channel Studios, you've got it, and that is interesting. But that I'm really interested here, because I think all of these values which you've espoused in Visit Cornwall's marketing over the last, are we allowed to say how many years you've been doing it now?
Decades.
Have really, you know, begun to be mainstream in terms of what people want now. And I mean, I don't think it's just COVID that so many people visit Cornwall on holiday, and increasingly, from my point of view, visit either on Zoom or physically, to do business here and explore some of the things we've got, you know, renewable energy, for example.
And I think that was the interesting sort of sociological experiment caused by last year's pandemic, and the one we're still in, is that some of the reaction, you know, 45% of our visitors come every year. They're more like fans. Yeah. You know, another 40% come every 2 or 3 years. And last year there was a load of new ones, and I think the difference was the reaction locally is that the ones who come year after year, or come down here quite a lot, have actually bought into what we're about. Yeah. The reaction came with almost the ones who sort of abuse a destination.
It was funny. That was noticeable in Falmouth, where I live. You know, there were people walking along Melville Road, which is the A39, in bikinis. You think they think they're in Benidorm or somewhere. It was a different crowd than normal. But
and therefore, one of the challenges we've got is make sure we invite the nicest way the people that value and care for Cornwall as much as we do, because that's the way. But I think the great thing that's come about, you know, that I'm most excited about in my dotterage years in this job, is we've now got a £250 million opportunity, £250 million of extra business turnover, if we really capture the winter market, and that would be around, quickly doing my calculations, around £50 million for the high street, £70 million for food and drink. So, and the high street to me and our market towns are very important. And people say, well, why are these people coming in the winter? Well, 3 massive new markets. The first one is the baby boomer generation, those in their late 60s, but more likely 70s, less likely to fly now, increased health issues. They've got money, richest generation will ever have, so pensioners are now not Turkey and Tinsel and Wallace Arnold. They are 4-star plus stuff. That's one big market, but they're worried about their health. So Nordic walking activities, special interest, all that can go on in the winter.
Nature, outdoorsy stuff again,
You've then got the stress generation, the ones below them, that are now starting to work at home a lot, and therefore their sanctuary's gone. So in other parts of the southwest and the workation, they can come down, link in. They can have breaks during the winter and just get away, and probably cold water swimming.
Well, the whole spa thing, we've got so many first-class spas. And
natural spas. Yeah. And the last one, which I think is the most exciting for you, is the new meat market. That's not to do with butchery, by the way.
Right, okay.
It's the meetings industry. Is all those small businesses that are now fragmented and aren't doing it. I've been doing some research on this, and the businesses that are working on a flexible basis with people working at home have all discovered they need to get together at least 3 times a year, if not maybe 6 times a year, for a night or two, to do their business review, their team planning, teamwork, which might be clearing a beach, Now, you imagine that if you look at the business cycle of when you normally review your business, it's in the autumn, and you do your business planning in the autumn and winter and your budget setting in early spring. That's when we've got plenty of accommodation.
Yeah.
And bringing a team down, staying at a waterside hotel, walking on the beach. Now, some of those might actually then decide that why are we actually up in Bristol anyway? Why don't we move to Cornwall?
Cornwall or part of the time in Cornwall or whatever.
So I think for one market, going after that market could actually then generate a lot more wider economy business with people saying, hang on a minute, why don't we move down?
Okay, so G7 aside, your major focus is on extending the season, not finding ways for them to spend more money. You think they're spending enough money when they're here now. I mean, they're spending a lot more than they would have done 15, 20 years ago. I mean, the whole food and drink offering, the quality of accommodation. I wrote an op-ed around the benefits of G7 for the Western Morning News yesterday, and I referred to that, that back in the 70s, the holiday offering in Cornwall was pretty bog standard, wasn't it? Gristly pasty or scone. Now the food and drink, the boutique hotels, and now increasingly the bigger hotels, the glamping sites, the fantastic camping sites from Lizard to Bude. I mean, you just sort of so they're spending more when they're here now. So it's extending the season. That's your major focus. And
it's really going for, like I'm saying, is build back from the winter. Let's stop trying to extend it, because we're 46% of bed nights are July and August, only 1% in January.
Okay.
3% in February.
Okay.
So, and we've got product then, we've got wildlife, we've got nature, we've got all sorts of things. So yes, it will extend the season, but it's almost build back from the winter now, not build out.
Yeah.
And the other one we're actually very keen on, and associations are keen on, is a compulsory registration scheme. We can't keep building capacity because that gets too much in the summer. The population of Cornwall's growing.
Yeah.
So, there are, give you quick figures, 25 million bed nights. So that's 25 million people here for 24 hours. Same people, obviously, because the average length is 6 nights. But we've got 14 million bed nights. 14 million day visits.
Okay.
And that's mainly locals. And there's nothing wrong with that. I quite like it. I'd go away and do stuff.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
With the growing population, that's going to sneak up to around 16 to 18 million anyway.
Okay.
So you can see that in August, there's just no more capacity.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and also if we build capacity and it gets crowded, like maybe you and I remember in the 70s, even 80s, then the price goes down. And then you're in the wrong way. We've had a virtuous cycle. In 1993, Cornwall was declared a tourism action zone along with Blackpool and Skegness. People forget that. We were at the bottom of the heap in 1993 because of the damage done in the 80s particularly. So the last thing I want to do is we've got a virtuous cycle of improving quality, getting a better price, improving quality, getting a better price. If you get into the volume market, you get actually no money to reinvest and you start going down again.
So actually going back to that whole nature, our values, well-being, if you can get people coming here out of season, they're going to have a wonderful experience of engagement with nature and a bit more room and so on and so forth. And of course, the other thing I was talking to people about the other day was if we can get those bed nights and restaurant bookings and so on and so forth up in January, February, for example, those businesses can employ people all year round. They then are worth training those people. They're then more productive and upwards and upwards you go.
Well, if I give you that 250 billion, if we did that, I mean, it needs an economist to check this out because I've done it my way. That would probably generate no new jobs, which is good, but it would probably enhance around 6,000 to 7,000 to 8,000 jobs of current people by about £3,000+ a year.
Well,
now that's got to be the priority.
That's got to be the priority, hasn't it?
And then also help with productivity.
Yeah. Well, I'd say they're training everything makes them more productive.
But if I give you a little business example, there's a self-catering place down on near Mevagissey, because my sister's told me about this one, and they've got a very niche market. They take around £1,500 a week in February for the rental. And it's on quilting, and they're booked up for 2 years with quilting groups coming down. So this build back from the winter is multiple niches based on people's passions and interests.
Yeah.
Because those over 60s with the money, they're either into photography, quilting, jewellery making,
bird
painting,
watching,
cookery. Cookery school's got a great one here.
Yeah, absolutely. Bridge weekends, or whatever it might be. Yeah.
And then when you've got things like, I'm not sure what the tides are doing. I should do. I've got a boat. But when you get those wonderful weeks in the winter when the tide's out in the middle of the day, you can do beach walking, you can do rock pool. We've just got to have those. Literally a real sort of chocolate box of activities for people to do, and then target those special interests.
Yes, yeah. And with social media and, you know, websites of those organisations, that's so much easier these days, isn't it? Get those niches at the right time.
And I got really frowned upon at a meeting with destinations nationally because I was complaining about the amount of television coverage we got. So you can imagine that got me a load of abuse because everybody and their uncle's been down here.
Yeah.
But I was saying that one of the challenges we're going to get, and it's one of the challenges talk to the LEP and the Council and Visit Britain, everybody, is we need to get a change of perception of what winter trade is like in Cornwall. Now, back in 2003, when I was at South West Tourism, we had a big research team, and we did research on Wales, particularly North Wales, ironically. I had great fun taking money off the Welsh Tourist Board. Yeah. And what we found then is that North Wales was seen as a dead place, a place you go just to walk, and old people went there. Well, anybody knows North Wales now. It was the adventure capital with Zip World. And so you can change perception, but you do need a 3 to 5 year campaign.
Okay.
So what we do need is great having all these pictures of sunny stuff. You know, I'm not really complaining.
Yeah.
But we need to actually really target to say actually those stormy days in the pub afterwards, having a lunch, walking around the great little independent shops in our market towns, and doing these activities is actually a different Cornwall. It's a Cornwall you don't know, but you'll love just as much.
And you'll love just much, and you'll get this nature thing that I'm talking about. Yeah. So several things you said there. So if we can get people to do that, in your industry, it's an industry of disparate thousands of small businesses largely. How do you get the 3 to 5 year campaign that you talked about in North Wales? Is it quite difficult to get everybody to coalesce around a message like that or not?
Well, I think this is where it's a combination of campaign and product development. Because I've been thinking about this, because we could do it and then go, well, where do I find it and who's doing it? So if you take a very simple concept, we're talking about for the winter of different towns being featured on different days. So if you take the Lawrence Museum, it's shut because it can't afford to stay open, but it might be able to open 1 day a week. It might need a bit of priming up with electric, but then that might tie in with the farmers market, could tie in with other things in Lanson. And that for Lanson Day might be Monday, but also on a Monday it might be Redruth Day, or it could be Falmouth Day. So you have 2 or 3 towns where there's quite a bit going on that day. So when people go, what do you do if it's wet? We've got these amazing towns to go to.
Yes.
So what you're going to, in terms of going forward, there's a product development, which is probably literally human bodies working with not just tourism, but the town councils, the town traders, the local chambers, on putting together the product really, because it's there. The beauty of this is we don't need 100 million quid to build a new Eden project. We've got all of this there. It just needs facilitating, coordinating, collating really, and then we can take that as Visit Cornwall to the market.
No, great, okay.
So it's actually, and in terms of G7 and sustainability, this is in a way, in the nicest way, sustainable way, sweating the assets that are sitting there dormant.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing that, and actually other businesses have made in other walks of life, have made their business on using that spare capacity, whether that's spare wide broadband capacity or whatever, use that. And here you are, all over Cornwall, we've got spare capacity at different times of the year or different times of the day.
So there might be some upgrading a bit here, but you don't need to build new accommodation, you don't need to build any of that. A lot of it's happened. And a good hotel might be doing 80% occupancy all year round, but lots are running at 60%. So if you had a factory that was only running at 60% and for large parts of the year was basically closed, you'd find a product to manufacture.
You absolutely would. That would be your R&D concentration would be use that machine to keep it whirring 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
So that's why it's interesting talking to the Chamber, because in a way there's a lot of language that's got to come back into tourism that's actually normal business language.
Business productivity and so on.
Yield managed, sweating assets that aren't being used, tackling underutilisation of basically equipment, which is capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to G7, that's going to be a moment in the spotlight. I'm using it, as I say, to try and get, we've got the window of the world open to us, to show what else we're about. That window, that global spotlight, will hopefully show Cornwall in an amazing light from a beauty point of view, and I hope from a clean and green economy point of view. So are you optimistic that actually there'll be a continuation of new people coming to Cornwall from the G7 spotlight opportunity, do you think? Or
I think there's 2 opportunities. One, that we could be very complacent, say everybody knows Cornwall. But But there's large groups of people in Cornwall. We have got a certain market. There's quite sort of middle class and whatever market, and there's a lot of ethnicity and change, and there's money in different places. So even within Britain, it'll be good to actually maybe turn a few heads towards Cornwall and look at it differently. Yeah. Because just because somebody's aware of something doesn't mean you're interested.
No.
I had a great marketing manager say everybody's aware of Ebola, but nobody wants it. So
yeah.
don't confuse awareness with interest.
Yeah.
The other one is, as you say, is international. We've been working away Cornwall because of Doc Martin, Poldark. You know, the greatest thing that's excited the overseas offices is not Poldark, not Doc Martin, it's the prequel to Game of Thrones.
Oh, right,
That's
yes.
what I'm really excited about, stories
yes,
about Cornwall.
Yeah.
And what I think is we don't want somebody to jump on a plane to come to Cornwall for 3 days and jump back again. What we're looking at is this is sensible travel for people, particularly Americans and particularly long haul, that it's their European journey and they're spending some of their time in Britain. Well, we want Cornwall to have some of that overseas income.
Yeah.
So we want it as part of a bigger sensible journey. And then the other markets are obviously close to markets like Germany, Netherlands, Belgium. Which we can actually get to different markets, because although Rosamund Pilcher is great, it does tend to have a female profile of over 50s.
And Rosamund Pilcher, for anybody, it's been the Sunday night viewing in Germany for many a year now, hasn't it?
But if you ask youngsters about Poldark in Britain, they wouldn't know about it. There's a certain profile based on Mr. Turner.
Indeed. Okay.
So this gets us into people going, wow. And the other thing internationally with Visit Britain we're working on is, which they're quite excited about, although I did offend several places when I said it wrongly. Well, I said it, but I didn't realise that Blackpool and Brighton were on the call. When I said we've got to change the image of the coast of Britain, that it's not pebbles and kiss me quick hats and piers. So you can imagine why I offended some people. But, you know, we have got a spectacular coast. We've got a spectacular environment. But for many places in the world, Britain is London, Victorian grim dramas, and kiss me quick act.
Absolutely. And I think we did dip into that in the 70s and 80s a bit, but I think we're so away from that now, aren't we? I was listening the other day, there's a new, I don't know whether Cornwall Council or Visit Cornwall have seen this yet. It's called Beach Check. It's an app, and you can, and it backs up everything that you've been saying for the past few years about don't all go to Kynance or Watergate on the same day. We've got 350 other beaches. That you can visit. So that app's quite useful, isn't it?
And in fact, it's interesting because we've been approached and we're working with CDC and the Space One. We'll keep them involved. There's a project, a European space project proposed, got to be secured yet, where there's some partner with low level multiple satellites. I don't understand. They fly around every hour, and they are actually able to take pictures through clouds and spot where cars are parked. So the idea of that is they're talking about was the big thing of visitor management. So if you take, unfortunately for dear old friends down in Porthcurno, that would actually show that they're building up on the roads. Now there's two things that could be. That could be fed straight into that app with a red thing saying full up. The other one, which is probably Cornwall Council will be delighted about, is send your enforcement officers down there.
Yes.
There's some rich hunting ground, and also that would keep the lanes clear.
Every silver lining has a cloud. Yes, indeed.
I can see the most interesting people going, oh, right. There's 2,000 quid's worth of fines down there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, clever of you to spot that. Yes, I shall be on the lookout for that. So you're pretty optimistic that what Cornwall's got is a proper 21st century option in terms of clean and green and you know, and what we've now got to offer people from amazing tourist attractions, great spread of from you know good B&Bs, camping, glamping, right up to boutique and international standard hotels. And if we can get the flow managed either by an app on a daily basis or, from what you were saying, spread out through the year, which I think just has remarkable value to Cornwall in terms of training and the future.
I'm positive, but also a bit nervous because we've got to stop complacency. If I can give you two sporting analogies, because I know you're rugby, but I'll give you the other one. Basically, we're done really well, and we're almost a bit like Exeter on the way up, Exeter Rugby Club, and Manchester City, because that's used to support, because I went there at college. Yeah. We've got to go to the world now. We've got to move it up. So what we're going to do is take this complacency. We've got to move from sustainable tourism, which is basically do no harm, to regenerative tourism, which is do good. So I was talking to a big resorter saying, do you really need a golf course, or could that be rewilded? Because that might be a bigger attraction. And, you know, things that do good when you do development. Because I think we got the opportunity to be, and one of the meeting with the universities to say, why haven't we got a research centre and an R&D expertise centre on all of this? Because we used to have Campbell School of Mines because we had a great mining industry. We've got a really positive visitor economy and tourism industry now. Let's take it to the next level. So even though I'm grey and withered and all the rest of it, my thing is I'm still scarred by seeing tourism in the 70s, end of the 70s, 80s, early 90s. We don't want to slide back.
No.
You know, we've had a lot, and the competition is all over us.
Yeah.
You know, don't worry about Devon because they can't organise anything between themselves. And I've said that to them. I've said that the biggest threat to Cornwall would be Devon getting his act together. In brackets, that's not going to happen in my lifetime. So that doesn't worry me. But you do get Norfolk, Suffolk. We've had Brittany over here. We've had Iceland over here. We've even had the Balearics come to Cornwall to say, how come you went through mass tourism and have come out the other side as a successful destination?
Interesting.
So but that's why I think on policy making, I'm not having a go, and also there is a bit of investment needed, not huge amounts. If you ignore the sector, it might then stop and start to get into that danger zone. So, you know, it's complacency within the sector in certain ways, complacency even within the community that we're all right, but also complacency in investment. It can play a part in levelling up. Yeah. Don't support it for its own sake. Please don't do that. No. But if we can improve productivity through things, if we can improve the levelling up, and if you can spin off, particularly around that meeting and business tourism with lots of other economic benefits, then a bit of wise investment to drive it forward while we're in a position of strength, like any good business should do. I remember, I think it's sort of affected me. There's a Desert Island Disc with Sir Terry Leahy, and Sue, whoever it was interviewed and said, why are you so aggressive? You know, why are we like this? And he went, I'm not aggressive in the way, I'm just healthily paranoid. We used to get together and say, you know, where's the new market? Who's going to grab it? Who's trying to take us down? Well, I think for like all businesses, if it's healthy, not bad paranoia, having that thing of where will we be in 10 years? Who's after us? Who's going to take it? Yeah. And that's what we need to do. So It's great that we're number one. It's great what we're doing. But actually, we've got some young, talented, a lot of younger people running businesses, and we need to drive it forward. In a more balanced economy, because if the rest of the economy picks up, the new sectors pick up, they'll keep the restaurants going.
Yeah, absolutely.
They keep everything else going. So the two, in a way, need to grow and burgeon in value, not volume.
Yes.
In value, not volume. And the only time is volume. Out in the winter. Yeah. Then I think that's only the best thing for Cornwall. Good.
And one thing you touched on there is we can't finish without just on that. Malcolm and I are both co-directors on Made in Cornwall CIC. And a lot of the members, I think there are 220 members of Made in Cornwall, a lot of them are in food and drink. And I think there's a certain complacency there we must avoid. When you mentioned Suffolk, I mean, I think Cornwall, you know, 7 years ago, was the perception of quality produce from the sea, from the land, from ice creams and so on was absolutely top notch. And I think we've taken our foot off the gas a little bit. And I fear that Gloucestershire and Suffolk and Wales and Scotland are coming up on the rails on food and drink. And I think we've got to avoid any complacency and get really back to marketing as a brand Cornwall issue on that.
And as I keep saying to marketing agencies, and especially PR agencies, that's great stuff, but let's not just believe all our bull. You know, let's really sort of shine and puts there, but also have a very honest thing about what we need to crack on with.
Absolutely.
Before actually everybody else spots it. So that's very healthy.
Absolutely.
You know, and complacency is the biggest enemy.
And I think that's a thoughtful moment to end on, Malcolm, because I think that phrase regenerative tourism is absolutely key. And the values, as you say, there's no point pretending our food and drink is the best or pretending our guest houses are the best. They've really actually got to deliver now. And you know, and if we're going to have this many people visiting us each year, this symbol of regenerative tourism is really going to be our mantra, isn't it? That's interesting.
And things like the plastic agenda, the energy agenda, all got to be really tackled.
Absolutely.
And all the way through the brand. You can't just do a bit of greenwash.
No, that would be the worst. We'd get caught out by that. And actually, deep in our hearts, Cornish people, we don't want that to be the case. We want to be authentic, forward-looking, and clean and green in that way. So, well, best of luck with G7. I'm sort of focusing myself now and my team who are getting sort of weary with it all on the sort of, you know, it'll all be over in 3.5 weeks' time, and you know, sort of there's a sort of moment beyond it where you go, Right, but for you then, the summer then really clicks into action, hopefully as wonderful as ever.
Yes, yeah, it's going to be a very short break, and then hopefully all going well.
Back on.
So we'll be busy with the summer, but hopefully that's all we'll be busy with.
Yeah, and I know, I talk to some people that, they're booked up in hotels right through to the end of October half term. So, fingers crossed we can get some prosperity back into Cornwall this year. That's been, a hard time for the last 14 months, obviously.
Yeah, and the final thing I'd say to the sector and any members of the public listening is, if we have a really good summer, which I know is going to be painful for us, and I apologise for that, but we'll still only turn over about 80% of this year's business from what we've already lost. So if we have a bumper summer and even a good autumn, we'll be lucky to get to 80-85% of normal business turnover. Okay. So we still would have add an extra 250 million loss to the 1.2 billion.
Okay.
So we're going to need to work hard next
We're going to have
well.
So you hope this continuity effect will click in, and let's hope that those who do come spend money on our wonderful, hotels, tourist attractions, restaurants, cafes, beachside shops and high streets and so on and so forth. So, no doubt, Malcolm, we'll be seeing lots more of each other over the coming weeks in the media centre in the Cornwall House at the G7 weekend, and then we might even find time for a beer after that.
That'd be good.
Thanks very much.